Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we continue our reading of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, New Jagannath Puri. It's a conversation in between Upendra and Srila Prabhupada. Apparently, after the Avalon Ballroom preaching program, which took place in the very beginning of Krishna consciousness in the West America, in San Francisco. So one day, when Upendra was alone with Prabhupada in his room, Prabhupada asked, "You're living with a young girl and people would take intoxicant?" For the second time, Upendra was convinced that Swamiji could read his mind and knew his entire life. "Yes," Upendra admitted, "but I'm not having," Prabhupada interrupted. "That is not good. Swamiji, I'm not having any sexual connections. Where there is a boy and where there is a girl," Prabhupada said, "there is sex. You must come and live with me." Upendra was delighted. "Yes, I'll come immediately." He took a few belongings from his apartment, left everything else with his girlfriend, and moved into the front room of Prabhupada's apartment. He was now Swamiji's personal servant. Prabhupada requested him to keep his job at the post office. Around midnight, as soon as Upendra got off work, he would return to the apartment. Prabhupada always left the door unlocked for him. Usually, soon after Upendra locked the door, crawled into his sleeping bag and fell asleep, he would be awakened by Prabhupada speaking into his dictating machine, composing teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Upendra would nod off again and sleep until 6. Upendra relished his close association with his spiritual master and became always cheerful. "I just want to be Swamiji's dog," he would often tell the other devotees. One time, Upendra was reading to himself from Srimad Bhagavatam. The world's subject matter is so presented through the lips of Srila Shukadev Goswami that any sincere audience who will lend his ears submissively to this message of the transcendental world will at once relish the transcendental mellow, distinguished from the perverted mellows of the material world. The ripened fruit is not dropped all of a sudden from the highest planet of Krishna Loka, but it has come down carefully, being handled by the chain of disciplic dissection, without any change or disturbances in the formation of the soft and ripened fruit. "You don't have any questions?" Prabhupada asked. Upendra looked up from the books. "No, Swamiji, I accept everything you say." Prabhupada began rocking strongly in his rocking chair and smiled as Upendra kept reading. Then Prabhupada taught Upendra the proper way to hold a book while reading, with the palm of both hands up and off the lap. This advice gave Upendra greater enthusiasm to please his spiritual master by reading his books. Upendra was still bothered by sexual desires. He thought that maybe he should get married, but he was confused about what a Krishna conscious marriage was supposed to be. "How could you be married," he puzzled, "if you don't love the girl you want to marry?" And how could you love her without having sex with her? He wanted to ask about this, but he kept it to himself, waiting for an opportunity and for the courage. One day, he entered Prabhupada's room, and as Prabhupada paced back and forth from one end to the room, with his 3 large bay windows overlooking Frederick Street to the other end, where his rocking chair sat. Now Upendra decided he could ask his question. Swamiji, he began, may I ask a question? Yes, Srila Prabhupada replied, stopping his pacing. If a boy is separate from a girl, then how can he learn to love her? Prabhupada began to walk back and forth again, chanting on his bead. After a moment, he turned and said softly, love, thank you. Love is for Krishna. And he walked toward the window and looked down at the street below. You want a girl? Pick one. He pointed towards some woman passing on the street. There is no love in this material world, he said. Love is for Krishna. Gradually, under Srila Prabhupada's pure influence, Upendra began to feel less agitated by sexual demands. He came to understand that he was not a material body, but a spiritual soul. That the soul's eternal nature was to love Krishna, and that for a pure devotee, for Swamiji, love was for Krishna. More and more, Upendra just wanted to be the servant of Swamiji. He thought of what foods to buy for him and how to make things comfortable for him. It was in his mood of wanting to serve Swamiji that Upendra visited the psychedelic shop one day. He had heard they had recently received some prints from India. So he went in and browsed through the prints, picked out some pictures of Lord Krishna and took them to Swamiji. In Prabhupada's room, along with other devotees, Upendra unrolled the prints one by one on Prabhupada's desk, waiting to see Prabhupada's response. As Upendra watched, it seemed to him that Swamiji was looking at photos of his personal friend. He was pleased with the pictures. Hayagriva commented that the religious art of the Indian prince was a bit garish. Garish means grossier? Garish. Huh? Garish means what? Simple, gross, something like that. The religious art of the Indian prince was a bit garish. C'était un peu enfantin. Un peu simple. Tiens, Chitralila, garish, ça veut dire quoi?
Garish, ça veut dire garage. Hein? Comment tu l'appelles?
Le style de the Indian prince was a bit garish. G-A-R-I-S-H. Un peu simplé, quoi. Indian prince was a bit garish.
Non, c'est un peu pas vulgaire, mais
grossier.
Grossier, quoi.
Simple. Hayagriva had commented that the religious art of the Indian prince was a bit garish. But Prabhupada explains that the technique didn't matter. The important thing was that the pictures were of Krishna and were executed according to Vedic descriptions. For the devotees, they were beautiful. They were none different from Krishna. Prabhupada selected as his favorite picture of Lord Krishna standing and playing his flute in the moonlight, the river Yamuna flowing by. By this picture, Krishna was known as Govinda. Prabhupada held the picture up and quoted the verse. Smeran bangitraya parichitam sachi vishtirna drishtim vamshinyashtadara kishalayam ujvalam chandrakinam Govinda kyam maritanumi itakeshiti topakantante maprekshitas tavat yadi saki bandhu sanjesti rangaha. He then took a sheet of paper and began writing, while the devotee watched him intently, listening to the scratching of the pen on the page. Then he read aloud, "My dear friend, if you still have an inclination to enjoy material life, society, friendship, and love, then please do not seek the boy named Govinda, who is standing in the tree-curved way, smiling and skillfully playing on his flute, his lips brightened by the full moonshine. Yamuna, can you write this nicely?" Prabhupada knew that Yamuna was a trained calligrapher. He asked her to print the verse and display it along with the picture by his sitting place in the temple. He wanted to be able to look at it during kirtans. Upendra thought it and played and prayed, "If I can just fix myself steadily in serving Swamiji, who has such love for Krishna, then I too will become transcendental." He felt that since it was not possible for him to see Govinda the way Swamiji saw him, he should serve Swamiji, the pure devotee of Govinda, who, and in that way, become pure. "I just want to become Swamiji's dog," Upendra said as he left the apartment. Amayanatimi nandasya gananjala shalakarai achuruminitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manubhishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutali Swayarupakadamayam Danati Swapadantikam Hare Krishna Karina Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpati Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastuti Tapta Kanchana Gurungira Dev Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priyam Panchakarpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Yaiva Chapatitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So here we see a pastime in between Upendra, just a brand new EP who joined Krishna consciousness and who had the chance, the opportunity, rare opportunity to associate closely with a pure devotee. Because after all, pure devotees are not meant to be in this world. Those pure devotees who are almost pure take birth in this world, have a mission, and generally they preach, and they disappear, they don't come back. So we see that association with pure devotee is rarely obtained. It's a rare chance. And here we see that Upendra, who was apparently an ordinary living entity loitering in the EP world with the smoke, the girlfriend, the whiskey, enjoying the dance, Avalon dance, all that. But by the association of Prabhupada, he could understand his right position. And as he see how Prabhupada was attached, and he could see what was real love, actually. So he could understand that his past activity that he was labeling as love, like advertisement and common people accept it, love in between a girl and a boy, he could understand what Prabhupada had said, that there is no love in this material world, and love is actually a world that should be saved or reserved for our relationship with Krishna. Otherwise, the best word that can be illustrate the word love in the material world is the exchange in between a mother and her offspring. This is what fits the closest possible to the relationship in between the living entity and God. It is disinterested and it aims at the welfare of the baby. And similarly, we see that here Upendra offered a disinterested service to Srila Prabhupada, just because he was convinced of the philosophy and he could see how Prabhupada was just enamored of a picture of Krishna standing near river Yamuna and playing his flute in the moonlight. Like this ordinary picture in India, there is plenty of them. And it looks like an ordinary, badly printed, bad quality, bad garish, all that simple Indian stuff from the past. And as with our Western psychology, we estimate the quality of the work. Oh, it is simple, it is Indian infantile style. Infantile, yeah, children-like style. So what's the value of such a picture? That's what we estimate with our gross eyes. But Prabhupada was not in this mood. He would appreciate the technique. It didn't matter which technique, if polished it was or not. Simple style, he would appreciate. He was appreciated from the moment it was oriented and depicting Krishna. That was the main principle. We also see in our visit to different temples, in Vrindavan, many temples, the deity is not so nicely ornamented. But people are taking very good care of it. If you see the Gopalji, a deity of Govinda Swami, it looks a little gross with eyes going here and there, a little les yeux protuberant eyes, a little like that. Externally, it looks a little garish, but when you see how he is worshipped, you understand that the people, they don't care about this aspect. They are just caring about the internal and the expression that they have some love and they want to do something positive for it. So the temperature of our spiritual life is how eager we are to do some service or something tangible to offer to Krishna. Not just chanting Hare Krishna, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. But what will you do for your wife? If you say her 1,000 times, I love you, but you don't do anything for her, You have to make arrangement for a nice bed, nice kitchen, nice children, nice sari, nice bangles, earrings, stuff, saris, all this. And for Krishna, the same. You can chant Hare Krishna, but you should be in depth. What can I do for him, for pleasing him? You should feel some you should feel in depth. This feeling of being in depth toward Krishna moves you to do something for Krishna or for the mission of Lord Chaitanya. So that's what happened to Upendra. He was agitated because he was in company with a girlfriend. He was living with her. Everything everybody knows. Then Prabhupada could read his mind. But what did Prabhupada? He didn't chastise him heavily. No. The preaching of Prabhupada was to show example and say what is the real definition of love, and to show an example of what all Prabhupada had love for Krishna. And of course, not everybody could have association of Sri Prabhupada and be influenced like Upendra was. Because after what happened is that Upendra was just absorbed in Swamiji, serving him, and like that. And little he forgot the girlfriend, the past, and all these things. It looked for him like an old movie, an old video cassette. And he was not anymore interested. So as long as he was engaged like that, his past activity didn't have any influence on him. He didn't live on this souvenir or past life, or maybe this was not completely erased. It was still there in the memory. But you didn't address this memory. You didn't go into it and look what's going on. It comes, it will end up in being lost in the whirlpool of time. If you stay engaged in serving Krishna, your past bad habits, your past bad activities will be set aside, and little by little they will seem to you pale and tasteless, and eventually forgotten. So we see here how Upendra was able to concentrate on Prabhupada's pleasure, and his past desires were maybe not completely eradicated, but put aside and almost forgotten. So the principle is that you don't deny a child who wants a bad thing for his health. You give him an ice cream, a better one, and as long as he's licking it, he will forget the bad stuff filled with gelatin or so many ugly things from the slaughterhouse, like they sell in the supermarket for children. So similarly, when you eat prasad, you take accustom to it, good prasad, then little by little you forget about the super nicely decorated cakes that you see at the supermarket or the bakery, because you know that behind there's bad consciousness, behind there is not cleanliness, uncleanliness, and made with abominable ingredients. When you know that and you are aware of it, uh, you understand it's like a poison apple. You beware of it. Then Prabhupada told Upendra the proper way to hold the book while reading, with the palm on both ends, up and off the lap. Like that. This advice gave Prabhupada, Upendra, greater enthusiasm to please his spiritual master by reading his books. So we see here that enthusiasm comes also from reading the books written by the spiritual master. Enthusiasm, utsaha, is one of the main impetus in spiritual life. When you lose enthusiasm, it means something is rusted in the gearbox. Some sand is there. Some unwanted things are impeding the advancement in spiritual life. And it will happen in our spiritual life, we can't avoid. There will always be some turquoise or dust or problems or apparent. The main thing is to avoid apparent in spiritual life that will impede our spiritual advancement. It always happens. We can't avoid it because material world is full of aggression. It's like that. So a big shelter is to take refuge, take shelter of reading Prabhupada books. This may counteract the lack of enthusiasm we may have, because we return to the source. We connect with the electricity battery when we are fatigued or like that. It happens. It happens. We can continue reading on a little. In New York, the boys had their orders from Prabhupada not to give any more money to Mr. Price. So here we change to the East Coast in New York, where the devotees are struggling to acquire a property, and the owner of the property is actually trying to entice them, seduce them, and steal their money. He's a contractor, so he's into money and he knows the purchase contract, he knows the tricks, etc. And he knows how to cheat people. So here the brand new devotees in New York and Brahmananda at first, they are into the struggle with Mr. Price. Like in Bombay, same thing. Prabhupada was had some heavy problems with Mr. Neil, who was trying to cheat him. So we see when it's a question of acquiring a property, be it in America or India or everywhere in the planet, it's not a simple thing. We have to be a little expert in what we buy, the contract, the person, the building itself. Is there any rotten thing, or it's always tricky. We have to take, because it's a lot of Lakshmi, a lot of money behind. So here was a problem with Mr. Price and the devotees in New York. So the boys had the order from Prabhupada not to give any more money to Mr. Price unless there was a purchase contract. Prabhupada still wanted the building. He had written to Brahmananda on March 4th, I hope when I go to New York next, I shall enter the new house forthwith. And he had written Rama Rayaram on March 7th. I'm very glad to learn that Brahmananda, yourself, and all others have the transcendental courage to take all risks for Krishna, and this act will enhance your glory in Krishna consciousness. But he wanted them not to be cheated by false promises. Take all risk for Krishna. Transcendental courage. Take risk for Krishna. Meanwhile, Mr. Price was asking the devotee to turn over $5,000 to his financier friend, Mr. Hall, who would then add $20,000 and made the down payment to the owner, Mr. Tyler. Mr. Price wanted Brahmananda to get the point across to His Excellency, means Prabhupada, for that negotiation had to be done in this fashion and right away, if they seriously wanted to get the house. Brahmananda wrote to Prabhupada, asking him to advise the bank to transfer $5,000 into the account controlled by the boys, the trustees of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Prabhupada gave permission and asked that the check be signed by the president and secretary, because Brahmananda and Satsvarupa are the main support for purchasing this house, and Kirtanananda is a supplement to this from the kitchen department. Kitchen Ananda was the surname of Kirtanananda. Kitchen apartment. But he said that the check should be made to the seller, Mr. Tyler, not to the financier, Mr. Hall. The money and the society is yours, Srila Prabhupada acknowledged. You can spend in any way, but it is my duty to give you advice as ever well-wisher. Then Mr. Price invited Brahmananda to meet Mr. Hall, and it suggested that Brahmananda come prepare with a check for $5,000. On the way, Mr. Price explained that Mr. Hall was perhaps the biggest real estate dealer in Manhattan, a multi-millionaire. He owned skyscrapers. Everything he owned was big. When Brahmananda entered Mr. Hall's office, he thought it was right out of Hollywood movie. A conference room 10 times bigger than the Second Avenue Temple room. And seated at the head of the large oval table was Mr. Hall himself. The room was in semi-darkness, with a few spotlights on Mr. Hall, who sat before a battery of telephones. Even as they began to discuss, Mr. Hall paused several times, picking up phones and talking to persons in various places across the country. Young man, Mr. Hall said to Brahmananda, we are helping you to get the house. It's a beautiful house, a New York City landmark. Then Mr. Hall's girlfriend called from a boat in the Caribbean. He talked to her for a while and then returned to Brahmananda and Mr. Price, who sat in the shadows at his conference table. Mr. Hall had a big contract he wanted Brahmananda to sign. Brahmananda knew that Swamiji wanted the contract, and here it was. He also knew that if he signed over the $5,000, he would have no other money and no extra income. And they knew it, but Swamiji wanted the building. Swamiji himself had looked at $100,000 building and had offered to buy them, even though he had very little money to back his offer up. And Brahmananda always did whatever Swamiji said. To sign this contract, Brahmananda concluded, was an act of faith in Swamiji and Krishna. He didn't analytically ask, where will the rest of the money come from? And to do so, he thought, would be like doubting Swamiji. So here he was in this big-time financer's office. It was wholesome. The millionaires were going to help. Mr. Price was at Brahmananda's elbow. Mr. Hall was telling Brahmananda that everything was all right. We are going to get you this house. Now it was actually going to happen. Here was one of the biggest men in Manhattan offering to help. And whereas Brahmananda had no money, Mr. Hall will be able to pick up the place very easily from the owner. Glancing quickly over the contract, Brahmananda signed. It was a deal, and he gave them the check for $5,000. So here we are in the deep tricking affair in between Mr. Price, who made a show and presented his so-called friend to Brahmananda to trick him. So they made a contract, but we see that Brahmananda was influenced by the show and the backdrop that they settled to impress him. It was these two foxes arranged a war situation to impress Brahmananda that it was in the pocket, no problem. They were soaking in the dollars like anything, and $5,000 house contract. It's bullshit. It's no problem. Bring the check, no problem. You can go. It's authentified. So Brahmananda was taken this way because, as we know, what will be the afterwards of the story is that the money was lost. Actually, the devotee lost these $5,000. Especially at the beginning of the movement, it was a heavy loss because money was scarce and with difficulty earned by some devotee who had part-time jobs. Like we are coming from the case of Upendra. Upendra was a servant of Srila Prabhupada, but Upendra was working as a post office. So a lot of devotees were engaged in some lucrative work to support the society at this time. Also Jayananda was a taxi driver. He was earning some money and giving to the temple in San Francisco. So some devotees were assigned to their service, and they were real sannyas because the money they were completely supporting Prabhupada's mission. We may have some comment or question about this little insight in the beginning of Srila Prabhupada preaching in the East and West Coast. Shri Prabhupada Lilamrita ki. Shri Guru Gauranga ki. Gaura Premanandi.